Hello, my name is Tim Hennessy, and today I'll be presenting on man-in-the-middle attacks and some defense methods that might be helpful. So you've probably heard in the news of a few different cyber attacks that have gone on. Um, the Colonial Pipeline, the Stuxnet, a couple of other attacks or whatever. But oftentimes in these attacks, there's a man-in-the-middle aspect. If not, it's an entirely man-in-the-middle attack itself. Um, so essentially, um, man-in-the-middle attack is an attacker stealing, intercepting data and transmissions from one device to another. And oftentimes, it's they just read it. Sometimes they'll modify the data and things like that. Um, Many times in these attacks, or in larger attacks, um, man in the middle is just part of the attacks. They'll use it in like phishing or something like that to gain access to users' credentials, convincing the user that it's a real um, a real web page when it's just a phishing landing page in order to gain their credentials and intercept and modify data essentially. Obviously, like I said, the goal is to modify slash steal information while remaining anonymous, making it seem like a normal exchange of information is underway. Some of the most popular targets for man-in-the-middle attacks are mobile applications, enterprise computer networks, and especially wireless networks, because wireless networks, they send out radio frequencies, um, which make it possible for you don't have to have immediate access to, let's say, a switch port or something like that to the network in order to intercept the data. A lot of times, I don't know if anyone's heard of the Wi-Fi Pineapple. That's a device that'll allow you to steal um, public Wi-Fi passwords, um, essentially using man in the middle. A couple other different targets. Industrial control systems are a big one, and smart grid and power systems. They are critical resources. They control the critical resources in different countries and different economies. So obviously they're a pretty big target um, for attackers, because uh, you know usually they have a lot of money, and if let's say they don't particularly like a certain country, um, it can cripple their economy. Um, a couple other things that are some easy targets: software-defined networks, which are just computer networks that use web applications in order to route network traffic, rather than the actual hardware. They are usually a bit easier to use man in the middle against, because you don't have to be in the direct vicinity of those applications in order to get access via man in the middle. Also, intelligent transportation systems that are used in smart cities are uh, are also a target for man in the middle attacks. So I'm just gonna dive a little bit into some of the targets here, like industrial control systems. Um, a reason that they're a big target, like I said before, is because they control critical resources for different countries. Disruption to the flow of these, they can cripple the economy in different countries and stuff that use these systems. Most of these industrial control systems, especially the ones in Europe, use the protocol IEC 60870-5-104 in their transmissions, using a master-slave device topology, or network topology. And the problem with that is this protocol can be kind of insecure, because it doesn't support packet verification. So when the master device receives a transmission from the slave device, um, it doesn't verify to make sure that the packet came from the correct device. So a malicious actor could potentially get in there and send any command or something like that, or simply just not even, or just read the transmissions if they wanted to, just to understand what's going on, um, without any type of knowledge from the master device. Here's a little bit of how a little bit of a design of how a network of this type might look, with the master, and where the man-in-the-middle attacker would come from. Another one of the ways that man-in-the-middle can impact a large group of people is through intelligent transportation systems. A lot of these are in the more technologically advanced cities, cities like Los Angeles, New York, things like that. They use different um, devices called RSUs that are strategically placed around the city to notify drivers of potentially hazardous road conditions, different accidents, and things of that nature. Um, they use the networks that they use are called vehicular ad hoc networks, or VANET, to send and communicate those notifications to the drivers. Now, it might be a little easier for an attacker to exploit one of these networks, again, because these RSUs that they use are spread out throughout the city. And if you do that, it makes it easier for an attacker to, first have an opportunity to gain access to those systems, and it also makes it harder to pinpoint exactly which RSU was exploited, and sending the wrong information to drivers. Some of the impacts of an attack on these systems could, they could be pretty catastrophic. Like, sending the wrong notifications to a driver could result in a large amount of, crashes, or different, especially like traffic signals being off and different things of that nature. It would just be a bad time in general. Um, so as far as the different types of man-in-the-middle attacks, these are just a few of them. Um, Obviously, there are more than just this, but these are some of the most prominent. A few: IP spoofing, address resolution protocol spoofing, DNS spoofing, BGP misdirection, and HTTPS spoofing. Um, Again, these are just some of the most common ones. They're not the end all be all when it comes to man in the middle attacks. Now, in general, when you're trying to counter man in the middle attacks, there are two mainly used countermeasures. Um, Certain companies, they'll go for the adopting increasingly complex encryption methods for their data, so they won't even try and stop the attacker from intercepting their data. They're just going to work on encrypting the data to where that the attacker can't decode it once it gets encrypted. Another method that's widely used is detecting the attacks as they happen or after they happen. So some companies and things like that, they'll concede the fact that they're going to get hacked, but they want to be able to detect it immediately upon it happening, so that they can avoid the loss of data. And generally, I think it's important to use both of that. Try and encrypt the data as much as you can, but also investing in detecting them as they happen or immediately after they happen is a good thing as well. Some of the defenses here, I'm not going to go over all of these, but DV-cert protocol is good to protect against compromised certificate authorities. A lot of intrusion detection rules are a good thing. Many companies use IDS and IPS, and usually they're pretty good at detecting unusual activity, but they're not perfect, obviously. Some of these other protocols, like TopoGuard and Sphinx, are also, or devices are also, good ideas as well. A couple other ones here, using encrypted SSL TLS, trusted time servers that can measure the time in between the transmission of packets between devices is also something that's been widely used. Um, Obviously it takes time for a man-in-the-middle attacker to intercept the data, read it, modify it if they want to, and retransmit it to um, its intended destination. So using those trusted time servers to examine if the latency is higher than normal could be an indicator of a man-in-the-middle attack. Um, Obviously, it's good to use defense in depth. One of these methods, just one of these methods, is not enough just to become completely secure against these attacks. It's good to use layers and layers of this security in order to keep your company secure. And in conclusion, man-in-the-middle attacks are more prevalent than ever. They're going to be around for a while. They're not going away anytime soon. It's rapidly developing. They're becoming more sophisticated. Then that's why it's important to implement a defense in depth strategy in order to mitigate any risks involved with that. Um, it's impossible to be totally secure, but it's important to be aware of the changes in the environment and developing threats to mitigate and minimize any threats to your network. Um, and with that, I'll go ahead and close it out. I want to thank you for joining me on this presentation. I'm Tim Hennessy. Thank you.